Welcome to the Reimagine podcast. Each week, give yourself 30 minutes and meet the people working hard to create the future of insurance today.
Hi, this is Paul Tyler, and welcome to another episode of the Reimagine podcast. Laura, how are you?
I'm doing well today, Paul. It's great to be here.
It is, and I think we're all getting probably. I'm assuming a lot of the listeners are planning to go to InsurTech Connect, which is a community that's done a lot to advance innovation inside our insurance ecosystem, and that actually is going to be a subset of our discussion today. I'm really excited about the conversation. So today we're really going to talk about how cities foster innovation and what that means for our insurance community, could mean for our insurance company here in Hartford. And so we want to try to connect some ideas that have taken place in Canada and beyond. We have a great guest, and also talk about how that connects or may change how we think about Hartford. So, Laura, do you want to do the actual intros?
Absolutely. So with us today, we have Paul Kalbfleisch, Principal Consultant of Paul Consulting, Inc. He's co-author of the book, The Joy Experiment, Starting a New Conversation on City Building, and our local Hartford hometown hero, Jackie Mandyck, who's the Executive Director of the iQuilt Partnership. And she works to provide leadership for the initiatives and the objectives leading iQuilt, Hartford 400, and so many more things. So Paul and Jackie, thank you so much for being here with us today. For the sake of our listeners, Paul, please, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing currently and what brought you here today.
Sure. So my name is Paul Kalbfleisch, and as mentioned, I'm a principal of my own consulting firm, Paul Consulting, which I spend most of my time working in the southern Ontario area of Canada, and primarily in the Waterloo region, helping developers, real estate developers and levels of city, try to create what I call good density. Good density being vibrant communities, and especially in the Waterloo region, the vibrant types of communities and structure that really fosters growth in the innovation economy, which is very important to that region.
And Paul, you actually have ties into the insurance community as well, correct?
Yes, that is true. I have sort of a zigzag career. I started my career off in the world of advertising, and then spent 8 years in the insurance industry at a company called the Mutual Life of Canada, which was, I think, at that time about the second or third largest insurance company in Canada. But it was during the demutualization process. So I spent 8 years in the insurance industry and was involved in helping that company go through the demutualization process. Now it's part of Sun Life, which is a company that many people sort of know about. So while I'm now in sort of more of a very maybe cutting edge or area where a lot of ideas are floating around and having to land them, I've also spent my time in the insurance industry, so I have a good sort of understanding of that perspective on today's topic.
And Jackie, tell us about who are you and what do you do in our community?
Thanks, Paul, and thanks for having me here today. So my name is Jackie Mandyck, and I'm the Executive Director of the iQuilt Partnership. And the partnership started about 14 years ago over at the Bushnell Center for the Performing Arts. We looked at a lot of ways that you can connect our downtown Hartford, our capital city here in the state of Connecticut, and how we were going to grow with trying to create a more walkable, a more connected downtown and city through creative placemaking and some very innovative designs. So we started out that way, and we've evolved over the past decade plus, working on a lot of small and major projects. One of the major projects we're working on right now is called Hartford 400 that we've been working with Congressman Larson and other local officials to really look at what do we want the capital region to be like in the year 2035 when we turn 400 years old. So how can we get there? What can we do? What kind of strategies can we implement to really make this region what we all want to live, work, and play in?
Yeah, and we've Laura and I've spent a lot of time working with a subset of that group to say, how do we bring innovation insurance to Hartford and inside, the companies. This weekend I was reading the New York Times, and I thought, picked up a section. They had a whole section on how COVID redefined education, and a great piece. It's they had people taking different positions. It's about social mobility. It's about learning. It's about taking care of kids. It's daycare is probably a pejorative term, but it was important for a lot of families to work. But Paul, I pulled out your book and kind of went back through it, and I'll throw first question out to both of you is, coming out of COVID, how has the definition of a purpose of a city changed, or has it?
That's a very big question. So there's probably several layers to that answer, I think. One aspect of cities is that we've all spent a lot of time being isolated. And I think as we come out of that, we now have a greater sense for the need to be together. And all of a sudden, the idea of public space, the space between buildings, is becoming not just a place to go and sit on a park bench, but a place to congregate. And I think we're having to try and figure out how we do that, and can public spaces be programmed specifically for congregation, and what does that mean for a community's identity? What does that mean for mental health? And what does that mean for communities that are trying to get into the innovation or advancing in the innovation economy, when so much of what is created in that innovation economy is by people who like to collaborate, who like things sort of mashing together and build off of each other's energy. So does a city and does the public space in the city help facilitate that? So those are a handful of things that I think have changed. The other things that have changed, I think, is we've all learned now that we don't have to necessarily live right next door to the offices, and then an office is becoming there's a different definition of the offices, and we're still figuring that out. But the idea of, you used to be able to, bring your own laptop to the office, bring your own phone, and now I think we're at the stage of bring your own city, which is a sort of a section in the book.
Jackie, how has this whole experience of the last couple of years shaped your vision of what Hartford should be, could be 5-10 years from now?
Yeah, I think, what COVID has taught us is the importance of the quality of place. So it's very important now for cities and for regions to really look at what is being offered to the people who live in this town and who work in this town. And that comes from, a lot of recreational amenities that people might have, transportation, modes of transportation, and not just transportation, but mobility. How do you get from one place to the other? We saw in 2.5 years during COVID, a tremendous amount of people wanting to do things outdoors. And how do you start to look at things that people can do outdoors, either by gathering or moving or, finding some sense of activity, community in an outdoor setting. So I think the quality of place issue has just been heightened. It's always been there, but it's been heightened over the last 2.5 years. And with remote work, it even becomes greater than that, because as you're trying to hire people in the insurance industry, if you've got a really good candidate, they don't necessarily in some positions have to be located in the city of Hartford or in any other type of region. They can work remotely to whatever extent that the job allows for that to happen. So really looking and focusing on our region and what we offer is really important going forward, and how we envision things. And I think to Paul's point, it's almost like you have to create the sets or the designs for people to have more of an intentional interaction. And I think that's very important going forward. That creative placemaking process that you go through to try and build community is very important, because quality of place not only includes your amenities that are around you, but it's that vibe that you get when you're talking to people and talking to the community, and it's being part of that community that's so important.
Jackie, you talk about quality of place, and Paul, you as well. How do you manage the conversation around quality of place? Because I'd imagine from a resident's perspective versus a corporate versus maybe a state level perspective, people define that differently. So if I'm working in downtown Hartford on Mondays and Tuesdays from 8:30 to 5, does my perception or my definition of quality of place or the things that I seek, do you, as individuals who are seeking to build and provide these innovative places within cities, do you take varying perspectives into the equation when, say, building a space that has to be more communal or it's looking to bring individuals together for innovation? How do you take that into consideration? Because I'd imagine you have various players at the table defining not only quality of place, but they're also using that place differently.
Absolutely. And, it's not just about what's around the corner or what's next door to the building that you work in or where you live. If you look at the city of Hartford, I can be skiing in 2 hours, or I could be down in the beach in an hour. I could be to Boston, or I could be New York. The quality of place doesn't have to necessarily mean what's right outside your door. It could be your location as far as what you can get to as well. So it all kind of comes in, Laura, to make this fabulous mix or recipe that equals success for any kind of place-based initiative or entity of where we are or place where we are. So I think, it really depends upon what you're trying to create in your community. I think at the heart and the core of it is you want things that brings community together, that highlights their senses. It goes back to those 5 senses. What can you try and create that really impacts and makes an impact on an individual using their senses, and, looking at how and what they want as far as an experience of where they live and work.
I'm glad Jackie took the first run at that answer, because I was struggling as you asked the question, but I've had time to think. I think the public space should be something that's very fluid, and a few examples. Years ago, in public space meant sort of landscaping, bench. And so during the day, in the sun, you could sit on the bench, and that would be one experience. And then at night, you could sit on the bench and night, and that would be another experience. But that was about the difference of it. But now I think the whole practice of designing public spaces is evolved greatly, and some of the core aspects of it is, it should be engaging. There should be things that people engage with. We're all now, most of us have grown up with the idea of theme parks, and so our expectations of public space has evolved. The bench is now higher. We want things that we can engage in. We want things that, as we participate in it, we are helping to create the experience. The nice thing about that is that, the spaces should, if people are a key ingredient in what happens in the space, then as the audience changes into the evening from the audience that was there, say, at lunch, compared to the audience that was there mid-afternoon, the experience should be different as well. And good public space design is starting to follow that, so that we should go down there tonight because it's different on Fridays than it is on Saturday afternoons, just by the nature of how people engage. And then there's also the aspect of well-designed public spaces should be have areas for people to be fully involved in it, but also passive areas where you can sit and be just an audience watching that. And if you think of a European square, you have the center of it where, something is going on and it's all active, but then you have the sort of surrounding areas around the edges where people can just sit and have a glass of wine and participate in. So I think the idea of public space is no longer static. Its job should be to fully and completely evolve based on how people engage with it, and you need to design it so that there are those doors open for people to engage with it.
Yeah, and Jackie, and I think about a mission a lot of us have had, which is, hey, let's bring innovation to Hartford and the insurance companies who are here. Now, pre-pandemic, it's interesting, Paul, to your point, which is, where's there? And it was very temporal and it was very fluid. We had hired a startup boot camp to run an incubator. Well, you had periods of time where we pulled all these people from different companies into this one space. End of 3, 4, 5 months, it's vacant. We have events in our building, Jackie, at specific times. We've had, Stacy's been pulling events in the convention center. Is if we kind of double clicked into insurance, is it really going to be event driven public space that will be critical for innovation going, forward? Is it ever going to go back to being the coffee shop, where, everybody runs into everybody who's getting coffee during lunch?
You can't give me a layup question here, can you, Paul? You
No.
have to really make
You
it.
have the answers, Jackie. You have the plan, master plan.
All of them. I think it's a combination. So think about when we're the most creative. When you say innovative, I think creative. So, to me, it's the same thing. It's that creative juice and gets that flowing, and different things motivate people, either business, personally, maybe an artist. You have to have certain settings to be able to create and to be innovative. And I think, sometimes that is like the traditionally conference-y type of space. But yet some of it might be me running into Laura and having a conversation about our kids that eventually evolves over to, oh my gosh, we're doing this at work and we're doing that. And oh, you should really talk to so-and-so. It's that by chance, it's that creative juice. And I think what happens in spaces, at least this is what happens to me, it's kind of like the snowball effect going down the hill. So once you can start the snowball going down the hill and you start to figure out how to build that snowball, it just starts to landslide down. And that's what creates the more innovative approaches to things, the thought design, the business lines. And I think to foster that in any type of location is exactly what you want. You want to create spaces and put people together, intentionally or not intentionally, but the spaces can help you do that. That creates that kind of thinking, that creativity, that thought process. And so I think whether it be a convention or whether it be just spaces where people gather, that you can then start those conversations or that thought process, that helps it in any kind of urban city environment. I mean, really anywhere.
I think city environments should start to be designed with the creative mind in mind. So let me walk through what does that mean. The innovators, the creative minds, whatever phrase you want to put to it. How do those minds work? They never stop. They're constantly running around thinking about it. I'm supposedly a creative person, and I don't mind saying sometimes I bill my clients for the times I'm out running because that's where the thinking happens. So sorry, I'm not at a desk, but I'm doing that. So their minds are always moving. Their minds are always thinking. They don't shut off just because they've gone through a door. And so the stimulus that they want and require should be constantly evolving. So space should be designed, public space should be designed so that maybe the outside of a building has some interesting, engaging public art or something, but it doesn't stop because you walk through the lobby. And it doesn't necessarily stop, it sort of evolves everywhere. And the other thing that these creative minds, so public space should be always on, just like these minds are always on. And it should be, to what Jackie was talking about, the chance to mash together, to mash people together, to mash ideas together, is very, very important, because creative minds, and they're looking very, very far to the right and the left and saying, holy mackerel, if we connected those two things, we got something new. And so public space should reflect that. My chance to sort of bump into people, my chance to put an artist and an engineer together just because they're nearby. Oh my gosh, what would ever happen? You have to program things that way, because that's the way the creative mind works, and you're trying to leverage and accentuate that creative process most of the times if you want to support innovation. And then the other thing that I think is important to acknowledge with the creative mind is it's exhausting. It's hard. It uses up a lot of energy to be trying to think of new things. So if you can create environments that are stimulating, that sort of re-inject energy into these people, it's really, really very important. And so sometimes it's almost like you got to think it's like the exact opposite of the cubicle. It's no, you want noise, you want all of these things, because you're dealing with a different type of mind, not a mind that kind of goes do straight forward, a mind that goes more like this, back and forth. I don't know if people are seeing the videos of my hands waving around or not, but it's quite spectacular, I think. So I think that's another way of looking at what Jackie was talking about, is designing space to facilitate what the creative mind does, and designing space that re-injects energy into the creative mind.
And I think Paul brings up a great point. And I guess I throw this back at you, Laura and Paul, to sit there and say, in the insurance industry or in any business, how are we giving those types of experiences to our employees to allow that creativity and that innovation to occur within your industry? So we're saying, Paul and I are saying, they need to get out, they need to look, they need to talk, they need to smell, they need to, find those creative, he's right. It's very tough to maintain the creativity and try and always evolve. But how do you do that? I think, Greater Hartford can only benefit from companies who allow their employees to seek out these experiences that helps get the juices flowing, that helps move about the creativity. Because if somebody is enjoying creative placemaking or looking at what an artist might do, that might inspire them to look at things a little differently, even in the insurance business, where you're talking about a lot of actuaries and numbers and everything else. But I guess I throw it back at you. What do you think businesses need to do to be able to utilize this growing movement of creative placemaking in cities to really benefit your organizations and your companies?
Laura.
I was going to say, Paul, this is the perfect segue for you. I'm going to kick it over to you in a second to talk about the work that you did with the Science Center and the partnership there. But for me, I think we have an opportunity. In a previous call, we talked a lot about how we don't tell our story enough, or we don't tell our story in a way that can truly inspire others. So talking about our building, for example, we have a 2-sided building. It's on the historic registry. It's really cool in a lot of ways. So for me, it's, what can we do to get our employees jazzed up? What can we do to show the community that we are innovative? We are out there. Why aren't we image mapping our building? Why aren't we at night showing and projecting images onto that space and using it as an opportunity to either share messages or to bring the community together? I know that we're working with Chip McCabe and Jordan Poland over at the HBID, and we're actually sponsoring a movie series that they're doing, Spooky Popcorn, to get people up onto Constitution Plaza to activate that space in a way where people will be out together during the evenings around the Halloween season watching scary movies. That's just fun for us. But using not only the physical space, but the opportunity, like you said, Jackie, having employers say to employees, get out there, be creative. And I think at Nassau, we're lucky in that we do have that creative freedom where, Paul's not going to look for me at my cubicle to say, Laura, where are you? You should be tied to your chair. If I'm out walking across the bridge and I'm enjoying the park done by Riverfront Recapture, or if I'm sitting in some of those, auditorium or stadium style chairs, just watching people row down the river. I can go do those things. I can walk the city, get inspiration, because it's okay. And that's the message to the employees is if you need to get out to think, because I too, Paul, I like to be active when I am the most creative. Sitting like a potato does nothing for me. But if I'm out doing something, that's for me when things happen. So going back to kind of the question, I think there are opportunities in using physical space to activate ideas. And, maybe it's a challenge on us, Paul, to use our building in creative ways to get that out there. But why don't you share what we did with the Science Center and the work you put together?
Yeah, sure. Before I even get there, Paul, there's a section in your book where you talk about celebration, and that really struck home for me, which is, and I think if I'm going to paraphrase it, you say, you attract what you celebrate.
Yeah.
And I think Jackie, that's probably the most important thing I think we can do inside companies is celebrate successes. What is innovation? It's sometimes, they're big, innovative things. Sometimes they're real small things that are really innovative. And Laura has got this, and I've written this down. Laura is her mission. She's gotten some senior people on board to sort of celebrate innovation inside our company. I think, it's harder than you'd think to get that ball rolling. But I think the biggest thing we can do is publicly celebrate when our employees do something different, make a change. And I think that's internal. I think outside, it's an interesting question. Which now what Laura was talking about was a partnership where we renewed a collaboration with the Science Center, and it's a great program. Matt, we've got some terrific partnership built over the last couple of years as well with our incubator and their team. But we sort of redefine a space virtually. I think, Paul, we sent you a clip here using some augmented reality because, unfortunately, if you want to redesign a space, Jackie, how long does this take? Wow. Planning, cost, expense. Is there a way to use technology to sort of create redefine those external environments in a way that helps drive that collaboration you want? I think there's a lot more we can do, Jackie, with that in our community, especially with the insurance sector. So, long-winded answer, but I think one is celebrate. By the way, Laura, we should probably have our own awards, right? We should do our own Retire Tech award program.
We should.
This is just something that's kind of popping in my head at this point. So I think we got to do better job celebrating what we are doing, and I think Paul, more creative with technology to redefine what that quote physical space is, and when the celebration comes out.
The phrase "you attract what you celebrate," which is from the book, and it's actually a phrase I've been using for a number of years. And it came out of a lot of research I was doing as to what cities that are really advancing themselves in the innovation economy do. It's kind of interesting. People say, how do we attract the talent? As if there's some sort of formula of, we pay them this much and you do that. And I said, well, celebrate what they do. it is true. You attract what you celebrate. You attract what you talk about. You attract what you put importance upon. And most importantly, you attract what you celebrate. In fact, so what you openly applaud, that's what you attract. And so you just take a look around. Well, what exactly are we celebrating through that type of definition? And you may go, oh my God, we're no wonder we're not getting, we're actually attracting the opposite of because you do one way or the other, you are attracting something. You are a magnet to something. And if you choose to, a lot of cities sort of we have that too kind of approach. We've got coffee shops too, and we've got bars with cool Edison light bulbs, and so we got the same things the other guys have. So what you're then celebrating is sameness and mundane, and so you are only going to attract people who are sort of seeking something safe and the promise of nothing rocking the boat. So it really does come down to attracting what you celebrate. And when it comes to buildings and offices, I heard someone talk, what's going to happen now that we've let the genie out of the bottle in terms of work from home. And it really is the genie's out of the bottle now. We know we can do it. And I think one of the interesting things someone said is head offices will become sort of artifacts of company culture. And I thought I'm not quite sure what that really means, but I think it's a very interesting direction that when you walk into a head office or you walk into the office, it should be a representation of your company culture as opposed to just a place to work. Because people can work from home, they can work everywhere. But when you come here, it's the physical manifestation of what the company's culture is. And at that point, that's a whole new meaning and a whole new purpose to what an office is. And it's a very valuable thing, I think, going forward, because I think you mentioned earlier, are we ever going to hang around the coffee shop or the water cooler again and exchange stories? Well, that's, that stuff is gone because, the whole world is different now. So what is it that pulls us together and gets us all rowing in the same direction? So I think it's, office space and public space that acts as artifacts of the culture you want to promote.
Well, sometimes what's old is new. So, I've worked at a number of insurance companies. MetLife was one of the first ones, and Paul, we had a Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
You would walk in, Jackie, and here were the names of the top agents. It's a big deal to qualify. You think about these. Again, what you celebrate, you track. Paul, this insurance business is tough. I'm like, you talk about a job where you're going to get 50 no's before you get a yes. And so a lot of these events, the insurance companies, historically put together, celebrate somebody persisting through that and having some remarkable achievements. It's not just about sales, it's about lives, families you protected, and you would have agents come in and visit this thing. They bring their family in to see their name on a wall, Jackie. Okay, company goes public, optimizes expenses, the Hall of Fame shrinks and shrinks and shrinks until it's probably like a box in some storage unit in New Jersey right now, unfortunately. But how do we do more of that? I don't know, Jackie. We've got some great signs around Hartford. I love walking around. I'm taking pictures. I send people like, Paul, if you walked around Hartford, there's an old sign that says, this is the first, Jackie, you know this. I'm sure you know this one. It says the first car ride taken by a president or something occurred here in Hartford. Here's the first payphone, right? And you've kind of done that, Jackie. You brought signage back, correct?
Yeah, I think you're bringing about something else, Paul. It's like we can't forget when we're looking at any of the work that we're all doing is it needs to be playful, it needs to be fun, and we need to take ourselves a little bit less seriously. So I think you and I have had the conversation before. I think we should be promoting that we're the actuarial capital of the world here in Hartford, and, the numbers show it, or something like that. I mean, be playful with it.
You could have a lot of fun with that. You really could.
We could. And I think that's important. Everybody wants to be in a place where people are having fun. And I think our companies can do it. It brings about, more creativity. It brings about, if you look at all the studies, innovation and creativity can build out of crisis, and it can also build out of momentum and, just playfulness. And that's when we're probably our most creative. So I think we've seen the crisis, and I think some people have survived the crisis of COVID because they have been able to be very, very creative. I think hopefully the next few years we can build out of people having fun and really trying to go to the next level of what we want to build for our communities. And I think, Paul says it really, really great in his book. And I think, just to quote him, and he says, joy is about being connected to the people and things that fill your life with purpose and make your world bigger. I don't know how much more you can sum up what we should be trying to build in our cities than that, and in our companies, our organizations. It's all about connectedness. So however we start to move forward with work at home or remote work, I still think that there's the connectivity that you need between individuals to be creative, to grow, and to be innovative.
So Jackie,
sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Laura. Go ahead.
I was going to say, sitting here, if I'm an individual who is in a city, regardless of the city location, how do I become more engaged? So we're all, remote for the most part. I know there are people who've gone back into the cities to work, but if I'm listening to this and I'm excited and I'm a creative and I want to become engaged and involved, how do I do that? How does someone become involved into this conversation?
I think it's just doing one thing, Laura. I've had a lot of people ask me that, like, what should we do? How do you become involved? And I think it's, do one thing that you wouldn't do, or makes you a little bit uncomfortable, or, put yourself out there a little bit. It could be ride a bus into work. It could be, I don't know, go to church. It could be walk the city streets. It could be just walking around, or bringing, I've brought my kids in. They're a little bit older now, but when they were littler, we'd just come in and we'd walk around. It doesn't have to be like this big moment or this big thing. It can just be one step, and then you start to build upon that. It could be starting a conversation with just one additional person at the coffee shop that you visit. It could be in your community that you live. It could be in your community that you work. It's just trying to open up and trying to build upon that. So I think that's how you can start small. I think if people think we have to do some big grandiose type of thing, that's not what it is. It's just starting to do one thing. Just try one thing different.
Cities are great places to observe. I mean, it's and observing sounds passive, but you can be very there. I think there is a form of active observing. And I just put those two words together, so I don't really know quite what that means. But, cities are just great places to observe humanity and observe people, and then to feel connected to that. And then that sort of pushes you to the next step. And that's why, I mentioned earlier that, great public space has its sort of observation decks to it. So that, I'm not in the middle of the square and I'm not jumping around on stuff, but I'm back here, but I'm feeling like I'm part of the energy. There's a wonderful area in Montreal, a lovely fountain area called near the Place des Arts Theater. And it is a huge fountain area, but there's no barrier. The fountain is part of the sidewalk. There's not even a 2-inch or 3-inch curb to step over. You're walking down the sidewalk, and all of a sudden there's a sort of a fountain. And kids run into it. They run in and play, and parents sort of stay back. And there's even a little grassy knoll for to sit on if you want to sort of watch your kids. But I've sat there watching, and I've noticed how slowly the adults get closer and closer and closer, and the kids come running in and out of the area. But because there's no barrier, They get closer, and then eventually the adults are in the water too and jumping around. It doesn't take long. So observing, I think, is really the first step, and then to start chasing what you're observing. That kind of sounds weird, but to get involved with what you're observing. It's if you have a creative inkling in your mind, you'll follow that, and you'll be in the middle of something before you know it.
Yeah, I do think small changes make big differences. Like I love the outdoor dining. Now, what if everybody who set those up, instead of putting all the chairs turning towards each other, put them out towards the street? Like I spent a couple days in Paris last week. I love it. They unabashedly turn the chairs out. The street is the entertainment.
Yeah.
It is about observation. It is about a community, and there is no barrier, right, other than a little table. I love that, and it just changes the dynamics and the interaction so quickly. Wait, turn chairs outward? Really?
Yeah. Yeah. It's and then also I saw in some city where instead of having park benches sort of park bench in a row all facing one direction, they purposely bolted them in so that if you sat down, you were facing a stranger. And I walked by and went, that's pretty cool. Yeah. And then they even sort of like bolted in a coffee table so that, it became a place to sit your coffee down. And if you don't want to talk to somebody, you don't have to, but if you're a little bit interested, you next thing you know, you are engaged. The next thing you are sharing stories. The next thing you know, you are part of something. And that's really the model of kind of what we're talking about, to get you to the point where you feel part of something.
It's almost like I'm hearing, as much as you're building out physical space, it's really more about building that connection to humans. And it's fascinating because I'm curious, 2 years, 5 years down the line, where we're going to be with physical space. And if we're going to be utilizing it in the same way and then adding, a virtual element to that, or are we going to be, dreaming completely differently? I have no idea, because I could see it going a million ways in my mind. But I think the heart of connection and then finding that joy is really important here. And I guess the analytic part of my brain is curious. Is there importance in measuring that joy? So do we use joy as a feeling to say, this is right, I know this is good? Or are we at some point going to say, joy is happening, we know this is good, this is what we want? Are we going to seek to measure joy and then look to build upon that to build our next installment or activation or creation? Or do we leave joy as a sense of, this was the goal and that's where it's going to be?
I think we're humans, and so we'll want to measure it. Now, we may not be able to do anything with the measurement, but we'll feel good about having measured something. Yeah. I'd be curious, so can we understand when people are feeling this way and they spend more time with somebody as opposed to in isolation, what changes? And, you have one sort of test group versus another test group. There's probably lots that we can learn from that. And then there's lots that we can then use to help program things in the future. But we also have to keep in mind that, one of the key aspects of joy is how it sneaks up on you. And if we overly program joy, then it stops being joy. So you use our research as a bit of a guide, but then throw it over to some artist who's going to do something really weird that no one thought of, and then we're back on track.
Well, Paul, we live in such a quantitative environment, everything, right? Jackie, it'd be interesting to know, forget about net promoter scores. We heard so much about it. What's Hartford's, joy score? It is.
I think it depends upon who you ask. I don't know if you can program for joy. sometimes I think happiness or, joy is brought about by seeking something or, doing something or just experiencing something. It doesn't have to be something that, oh, I go here and I'm going to feel happiness or I'm going to feel joy. It might be about the experience of getting there rather than when you get there. So I don't know how to answer that, Paul. Basically, I think I think what makes you happy might make me cringe. I think to Paul's statements earlier, it needs to be flexible space. It needs to be different people can get different things out of maybe the same thing with that experience. So
Yeah,
the
I think
willingness, I think that's very important. Being, I also think being creative and being innovative, you have to have a high tolerance for risk because you need to make it okay for people to fail, for them to try and be more creative and more innovative. So it's building that kind of culture around things as well. We can talk about joy, we can talk about creativity, we can talk about innovation, but it's trying to build that supportive network that allows people to do that.
yeah, that you use the word experimentation in our book's called The Joy Experiments, and the word experiment I think is just as important as the word joy, in terms of, in order to do all the things we're talking about, in order to be an innovation center, in order to be a company that fosters innovation, or a community that fosters innovation, you have to be able to also accept experimentation and failure as part of that. That failure is not really failure is not you give up. Failure is, okay, I learned how not to do it, so now I'm one step closer to learning how to do it, sort of thing. And as much as it's great to have the walls of fame for those who succeed, it's also good to find ways of letting people sort of, in a weird way, celebrate the struggle, or celebrate the process. Maybe that's the best phrase. Celebrating the process, which is, a lot of stops and starts and twisting arounds, and you can do that by creating a maze. You could create a public maze in a public square that's really a metaphor for the process of innovation, and have fun and some laughs in it, and come out the other end feeling like, yeah, it's okay. We all kind of get it wrong at first, but eventually we get it right, and that's part of the process. And so let's all stick together as we go through that.
Excellent. Laura?
My favorite question. I save it to the end. Sometimes I wish I just start with it. Jackie, what is your why? Why do you wake up every morning and do the work that you do?
Oh my goodness, Laura, you guys really, I feel like I should be getting a college credit for this or something.
We can create an award for you, Jackie.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Why do I get up every morning? I really think the work that my organization does makes a difference. And I think that's very important for my personal satisfaction, for definitely my board thinking that that's, what we do. But it truly is, some days I don't wake up feeling like I've made a difference. Some days are a struggle. But as I heard somebody say just the other day, that if 33% of the time I'm feeling really great about what I'm doing, and 33% of the time I'm feeling good, and then 33% of the time it's a little bit of a struggle, then that's an okay. I'll take those percentages. I want to make a difference, and I want our organization to make a difference, and I think we do. And I think that's why I do the work that I do. And honestly, I find joy in what I do. I find joy in connecting. I think that's one of the things we haven't touched upon during the podcast today is, a lot of the work that I do is I'm connecting people a lot in organizations and thoughts and process and projects. And how can we make something, how can we take 2 and 2 and get way more than 4? So my thing is it's kind of putting those puzzle pieces together. That brings me joy. And I'm very, very fortunate because my organization, my board, and I found a job that allows me to do that and be fulfilled doing that kind of work. So I think that's my why. That's my why.
And Paul, what is your why?
Oh, darn. I thought you were going to give me a different question.
Never.
Okay. Well, I think I have 2 whys. One is I'm a very, very lucky guy to be able to be involved in the stuff that I'm doing. Richard Florida, I saw Richard Florida give a talk, and he started off by saying, I'm a very fortunate individual. I have no business being involved in this. I'm a very, very lucky person, he said. And lucky people have this way of landing in the middle of stuff they have no business being in the middle of. And the fact that they shouldn't be there is why they can add value. And I said, oh, that's okay. I'm gonna steal that and start using it to describe my situation. I mean, I'm not an architect. I'm not an urban planner. But I am a person who, through my years in the field of marketing, studied society and studied culture and studied what goes on with people, and that then allowed me to sort of move into this space. And I'm involved in all kinds of great and fantastic projects. So my why is I get great joy out of doing what I do. The second one is I believe this area that we're talking about, public space and bringing people connection and congregation and all of these things, is incredibly important right now. Society is divided, and you can talk about any topic on anything, and we're divided. And there's a million reasons why, to the point where you can say the we is broken. And we have to rebuild the we. And where's that going to happen? It's not going to come from national political parties. It's not going to come from, big organizations. We're not going to fix it in Davos, Switzerland. We're going to fix it in cities. And we're going to fix it in cities by creating public spaces where 2 people who don't belong to the same algorithm can bump into each other, start doing something, and laugh and giggle, and find that hey, we're not so different. And it may sound sort of silly and glib to say that, playing in public is where we start to fix society. But, playing between human beings is a very, very, very complex psychological thing. It's really, there's books about how complex the idea of play is. But that's, I think, where we are going to start to fix the broken society. Because I can't think of anywhere else. You tell me where we're going to fix it. If that's not the front line, tell me what the front line is. So that's my other big why, is because I think what we're doing and what we're talking about here today is the front lines of fixing a divided and broken society.
Like this was terrific conversation, Paul. Okay, Joy Experiments. We'll put a link in the notes for anybody who wants to get a copy of this. Paul, how else should people reach out to you, get in touch?
So you can get the book at thejoyexperiments.com. And if you want to talk to me, you can email me at paul@paulconsultinginc.com. Terrific.
Jackie, people want to learn more about Hartford 400.
Yep, they can go to hartford400.org, or they can go to the iQuilt plan, and my email's right on there. They're welcome to give me a call or a shout out. Love to talk to people because that's what gets me going in creative. So happy to have some conversations with people if they're interested.
Yeah, terrific. All right, listen, Paul, thanks for the time. Jackie, Laura, and thanks to all the listeners. Give us feedback, suggest guests if you'd like to be on here. Let us know. And that said, tune in again next week for another episode of the Reimagine Podcast.
Thank you
Thanks.
for this. This
Thanks
was a
for
wonderful
listening.
conversation. Thank you.
If you enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend us on iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more great information about this company and other great startups at imagine.nfg.com.